Welcome to Taming Disaster with Drones for Good podcast. Tune in for in-depth interviews, one-of-a-kind perspectives, and insightful conversations with industry leaders who are using drones to help prepare for, respond to, and recover from complex emergencies and major disasters around the world. And now, from the AIRT Studios in Miami, Florida, the heart of Hurricane Alley, here is your host, Christopher Todd.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Taming Disaster Drones for Good of 2021. Hope you all had a very happy new year. It's good to have you back. We went on a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back as well. And I'm really excited about our first guest of the year. He is the UAS Department Head and UAS Executive Director of Applied Aviation Research at Kansas State University Polytechnic in Salina, Kansas. Kurt Carraway. Kurt, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Chris, thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So, those who kind of follow the podcast know the first question I always like to ask the guest is, to tell us a little bit about your background. And I know you've got a really diverse background in aviation, in serving the country, in the military. So can you tell us a little bit about how you started flying, your military service, and how you got over to Kansas State Polytech?
Sure. I spent 25 years in the Air Force. I retired 6 years ago. Hard to believe it's been that long. But it was a career centered in aviation. I started out as a navigator in a KC-135. And as the wonders of GPS technology developed, the need for a navigator dissolved. And so that technology essentially put me out of a job, and fortunately, I was able to lean into a new branch, which is unmanned aircraft systems, through the Air Force. And they had a policy where if you were a navigator, but also had FAA commercial instrument ratings, you could go be a UAS pilot. And so I did that. So I was able to move over the same technology that put me out of a job, created new opportunities for me, and I was able to really help introduce the unmanned aircraft systems technologies to the Air Force for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And so the latter portion of my career was focused on that. And then when I retired and I reflected back on the things that I really enjoyed the most during my career, it had to do with opportunities to conduct flight training. Really like to be able to take a student who's totally unqualified, spend some time with them, and at the end of the training experience, send them out the door, fully mission ready and ready to go. And so when I thought about what the next chapter of my life should look like, I knew that I wanted to go and teach and instruct. And I was just really fortunate that Kansas State University had an opening for a UAS flight operations manager. And I started out in that role, and here I am.
Wow. So let me just unpack that a little bit, because, you made a point, and as you were saying it, it made me think, for lack of a better example, of the movie Airplane. But when I was a little kid and we used to fly down to Florida from the cold winters in Wisconsin, I remember there were three guys in the cockpit, and they were all guys at that time. And one was the navigator. And you don't see that anymore because technology had evolved it. But I guess I think a lot of people don't really consider that probably when they started flying for many of us, there were three people up in that cockpit, and one had the sole job of making sure the airplane or the aircraft is getting from point A to point B. And that was your role back in the day.
That's right. When we would fly overseas, over the ocean, the technology that we used was dead reckoning, backed up with celestial navigation. So using the sun and the stars to help estimate our position. We really didn't have the luxury of GPS to make sure that we had high confidence in exactly where we were. So there was an art to it back then. I'm probably dating myself by even going down that path. But
no, you're not, because I know a little bit about that as a mariner and a Coast Guard licensed captain with compass variation and deviation and magnetic interference. Never got into celestial navigation. How did you do that from an airplane? Did you have like a bubble window in the top, or how were you able to see the stars?
Well, we actually we had a sextant port in the the sextant was, it basically was about 3 feet tall, and the majority of it was a tube with the mirror in it, and you would insert it up like a periscope. We actually had a port in the top of the aircraft. We would open up the port, and the sextant would go up, and then we would dial in all of the variables and take measurements off of the sun or planets or stars and plot things out. Celestial navigation is very much used, or at least it was in maritime navigation as well.
Wow. So that is amazing, because it, as you alluded to, it really is becoming a lost art, because we're so dependent on global positioning systems now. I mean, so, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, but I think it's important because as we get into unmanned systems, GPS is so crucial. When did you first start seeing GPS becoming the standard for military use? And when you saw kind of the writing on the wall of, wow, there's not going to be 3 guys in these cockpits anymore because this GPS system is going to be taking that over?
Well, the discussion about that technology started when I was a lieutenant back in the early 90s, and it really, I flew my last sortie or flight in a KC-135 back in 2001, and they were definitely in the process of getting phased out at about that point. And I think probably by 2003, 2004, most KC-135s no longer had navigators, but it took a while. We saw the technology coming, but for the first half of my career, we were being told, your services in this capacity aren't going to be needed for long. But it took a while to be able to get the systems wrung out and really to where they are today. And when we started out, we had handheld units that, with the antenna would actually suction cup in the mirror, and the co-pilot would keep an eye on that. And we would use it initially as a backup tool, but of course now it's fully integrated into the multifunction displays in the cockpit, and with redundancy and high degree of reliability baked into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it difficult to get some of the old school generals to really buy off that this new fancy satellite technology was really going to be accurate enough to guide the aircraft where they needed to be?
Well, it took some time for, I think, everybody to gain confidence in that technology, and also to make sure that the vulnerabilities of it weren't overlooked. And so, redundancy is a critical component with a lot of those things, and redundant not just in terms of backups to a single type of system, but alternative systems to use for those types of purposes as well.
And that sounds like a perfect segue into unmanned aircraft systems, another new technology that is winning people over slowly but surely. Just off the top of your head, are you seeing any comparables from GPS to UAS as far as the adoption cycle and how it's being received by people? Or do you think it's just 2 different animals at this point?
I don't think it's different animals. I think it's there's a cycle or an evolution of technology, and I think that we're seeing that. And there's a commonality there as well. And one of the things that I like to share with students, because back then within our community of navigators, it was kind of gloomy. It's like, hey, this technology is going to put us out of a job. But the other part that I don't lose sight on is without GPS, none of this would be happening.
Yep.
Any UAS that's really strong in a commercial sense has a GPS really dependability when it comes to the autonomous solutions. There are some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, they're really dependent on that. And so that same technology that was closing doors opened a lot of doors. And so, one of the things that I like to share with our students and others is that, a lot of it has to do with your perspective of things when it comes to this. So the same technology that potentially could have closed doors, ended careers, opened up a whole another range of career opportunities, and really UAS wouldn't be where they are without it.
So you're coming out of the Air Force. Kansas State Polytech offers you this position. What made you connect with Kansas State? Did you have a connection there, or you just happened to be in the area, or what was the linchpin there?
No to both. So my last active duty assignment was in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Oh, nice.
So it was, and we loved it there. But I did grow up in St. Louis and in the Midwest, and the idea of getting closer to our family that we'd been separated for 25 years, it was appealing. The hospitality of the Midwesterners was appealing. Cost of living was appealing, and never mind the fact that Kansas State University, even then 6 years ago, had a strong UAS reputation and strong relationships with the Federal Aviation Administration. And as I started thinking about where I wanted to go next, I really wanted to get into a position where I would be able to align with an entity that had a strong FAA relationship, because I understood from my military career how much work really needed to be done to commercialize UAS. So, I mean, back then there wasn't Part 107.
Yeah.
So there was really no pathway to commercial UAS operations, and look how far we've come.
So I've been to the facility you have there. It's a beautiful facility. And any of you listening, if you ever get a chance, if you're ever going through Salina, Kansas, make sure you check out just the wonderful facility at Kansas State Polytechnic, the UAS program there. You guys have a hangar on the airport base. I mean, tell us what the program was like when you got there, and how you've kind of turned it into what it is now.
Well, when I first got there, I think I was the fifth full-time employee to be part of the organization. We had a research lead. I came on as a flight operations manager. We had a couple of folks who specialized in the maintenance side of it, an electronics guy, a mechanical guy, and a faculty instructor. And so it was a pretty small group at the time, but we had the opportunity to conduct some different forms of federal research. But the Federal Aviation Administration established a Center of Excellence for Research. ASSURE is the name of that entity, and it's a consortium of universities across the nation with about 15 or so core universities that are part of that, and Kansas State was one of those universities. And so when I first got there, that was kind of the lay of the land. Since then, we've tripled in terms of the number of full-time employees that we have, and that ramp up is increasing on a pretty steep slope right now with some of the other areas of growth that we're going through right now.
So what are some of the different types of programs that you offer to students there at the university?
So at the university, we have two different UAS degrees. One is a flight and operations degree, and it's really focused on the pilot side of it for advanced operations. And that's really the department that I'm responsible for. Our focus is on the flight and operations side. We also have a Department of Integrated Studies, and within that we have a strong engineering technology program. And there is a UAS degree that is focused on the engineering technology side of things, more on the design and integration of different components onto UAS. So those are two of the big programs. But within the flight and operations regime, currently we have a 4-year bachelor's degree. We have a minor, which is proving to be appealing to students that are outside of UAS but want to incorporate it in. So agronomy, journalism, engineering, those are areas where some of our students enrolled in the minor are coming from. And just this fall, we started offering an introductory certificate in UAS, which is it's a small 13 credit hour series of courses. There's 5 courses that make up that certificate. One of those courses is an intro to multi-rotor class. That one has to be done in a face-to-face format, but the other courses are all available online. So, and we're starting to get a number of inquiries from high school students that want to enroll at the high school level to start working on that certificate with an eye on coming to the university when they graduate. Those 13 credit hours feed directly into the program, so it'll shorten the time that they spend with us working on their 4-year degree. And then the other thing we're about to roll out is a 2-year associate degree, which will be a subset of our bachelor's. And the goal there is to develop partnerships with community colleges such that they can offer that program to their regional high schools. So we want to really be able to help push down the introduction to the UAS education experience at a high school level with options for college credit.
That's really interesting because I think a lot of educational institutions are so focused on UAS only, but to have those minors makes a lot of sense. I mean, a journalism student who wants to also have a minor in UAS operations, and then they're going out in the job market, not only understanding journalism, but how to operate a UAS is pretty powerful. And I'm sure Kansas State has a lot of different disciplines and degrees that can piggyback into UAS in one form or another.
Right.
So that's great.
We offer that on largely on our Manhattan campus, which is the larger campus within the program.
Yep. So, but how many students are enrolled right now in your UAS program?
I don't. It's probably in the 100 range.
Okay.
As you look across the programs, I really think that we're going to see a significant increase as we start to reach out, establish those relationships to high school students. And that's something that we're really excited about.
How has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your ability to educate some of these students?
It's been challenging. So it really depends on the course. So like many universities, this thing really, the significance of it became evident during spring break. And towards the tail end of our spring break period, the determination was made that we would not be able to bring students back on campus for the rest of that semester. And so that was a heck of a challenge. As you could imagine, for our program, where a number of our courses are flight labs, both manned and unmanned, by the way, you can't do that in a remote environment. So in some cases, some of our courses had to be put on hold until we could get to a place where we could safely return to a face-to-face environment. But for those courses where we were able to continue online, our faculty did an amazing job. And essentially what we did is we gave them one extra week. So 1 week off after spring break to prepare to resume the semester in an online environment. And just amazing the amount of work that faculty had to put in to be able to make that transition happen. But they did. And we were able to get through the semester doing the best that we could, and with that approach. And for some courses where we couldn't do everything in a remote environment, then we had to give them we call them incompletes. They just weren't able to complete the requirements for the semester. And then as safety protocols were developed and came into effect, we were able to start working with those students in the summer to start getting them caught up and back on track. And then by the fall semester, we were able to get back to a full face-to-face environment with some schedule modifications, but we were able to get back and start that semester on time and really make it happen. So it's been a light transition. I don't want to downplay it. And in some cases, the experience was not the same. It's had some impact, but COVID has impacted everything.
It sure has. Yeah. I mean, I think as we look back, I mean, we've all kind of been caught in the middle of this for the better part of a year now. But I think as we look back, there's going to be so many sub stories that emerge out of this. And one of them is going to be just the ability of colleges and universities to pivot so quickly, and what worked and what didn't work. So congrats to you and your staff for keeping it going and plugging away. I want to talk a little bit about ASSURE, because you recently got a pretty big grant from the FAA through ASSURE. Is that accurate?
It is. It's actually, I think you're referring to a press release in which the FAA announced funding for 7 additional projects through the ASSURE, the Center of Excellence. We were just fortunate enough to be involved in, I think, 6 of those projects. And so that work is about to start. We anticipate getting those grants in place really any day now. I thought we might have them fully executed in January, but we're still waiting for the signed grants, and then we'll start working. And they're all multi-university projects helping the FAA advance their efforts in rulemaking.
Now, I if I remember correctly, a few of them have like a public safety focus. Is that true?
One of the projects in particular pertains to disaster response, and it's a follow-on to a project that University of Alabama Huntsville has been leading, and we were not able to join the team for the first round of the project, but for the second round, we're going to be joining them, and our focus is going to be to execute a series of, I think it's about half a dozen disaster response exercises. And our specific task or role in that project is going to be to go to those different locations and observe how they're conducted, gather and document some lessons learned so that we can really help refine that process, help the FAA work through any types of regulatory accommodations that might be needed. And when I say that, what I mean is we'll be making recommendations for the FAA to decide whether or not they're going to make changes, and hopefully continue to create opportunities for using this technology for disaster response. And I don't think anybody understands the benefits better than you and the audience here today. That's just, there's life-saving implications here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I'm excited to learn more about the research. I mean, I've had some conversations with Jerry Hendricks down at University of Alabama, Huntsville, and your counterpart at the university. And I'm sure you two are working very closely. So I think the whole industry and the whole emergency management sector is probably keen to get a glimpse of some of the research that's coming out, because there is so much work that needs to be done. I mean, we're really just touching the tip of the iceberg at this point with what the capabilities of these systems are. And as we get into new types of payloads and flight time and power systems and swarming, it's the sky is definitely the limit, pun intended.
Right.
So are you, my understanding is University of Huntsville is the lead on some of that in the disaster response, or are you guys taking a leading role too in certain areas?
They're the lead on that. We're one of the collaborating universities on that. And that's a rather large project.
It seemed like there was a lot of money going there.
I think there's about 6 to 8 universities that are contributing to that one, and rightly so, because it's so darn important. And those exercises will be occurring in different locations within the country to try to enable us to get a good representation of the different types of disasters that we face as a nation.
So any idea on the timeline as far as when some outcomes might be expected from some of that research?
I believe that project is a 2-year project. And like I said, I thought that would have kicked off in January, but it'll be pretty quick. And I shouldn't say kicked off because it's a continuation.
Okay.
Every time we do one of those exercises and we gather our lessons learned, hopefully there'll be opportunities to share that within the public safety community. Because some of it will just be practical application types of observations as well. So,
understood.
Just the coordination and some of those factors. Hopefully, we can help come up with some good best practices for those types of factors.
Much needed. And if I remember correctly, you also announced coming into this year some new courses for the public safety for first responders on the use of drones. Tell us a little bit about that and how those courses are going.
Sure. We're one of the things that we really believe in is technology transfer. We're what's called a land grant institution, and so there's a specified expectation that as we do research, especially with these front edge technologies, that we don't only share that with our enrolled students, but we share it within the communities that we're in. And so we offer some non-credit short courses. We started off this whole process with a 3-day Part 107 course. It just so happens that about 40% of the folks that have come through are coming from a public safety background. And the feedback that we got from them was, we'd like to come back and have you teach us how to implement these into, our day-to-day activities. And so we started about almost 3 years ago with a law enforcement course, and that's been really popular. And now we've spent some time over the spring and summer developing a similar course, but it's focused on hazmat response and firefighting. And so that course, we've got that slated to offer for the first time here in March, and we're excited about that. And then one of the things that's next on our list is to do something similar for emergency managers.
Okay, exciting. So for listeners who are out there and they want to get more information, either on the K-State Aviation programs, the UAS programs, or for first responders, emergency services folks looking for more information on these courses, what is the best source for them to go to online to find that information?
The easy way is to just Google Kansas State University UAS. And that'll take you to the Polytechnic website. That Polytechnic is the campus that we're on, and it has information about our 4-credit degree programs, the minor that I referenced, the majors, but it also has information about the different non-credit training options that I just described.
Awesome. So Google Kansas State Polytechnic and look for the UAS and aviation information, and it'll all be there.
That'll do it. It's easy to find.
So, Kurt, as we start to wind this down, I kind of want to get your thoughts on where you see the UAS industry headed over the next couple of years. What you think is going to be big on the horizon. Any thoughts you have on remote ID and what we should be looking for from K-State Polytech?
I'm excited about what's happening. Part 107 was exciting because it finally created a way for, a scalable, really conservative approach, but it really opened the doors for commercial operations. And then we just recently saw the updated list of regulations that's going to continue to make night operations easier. It's got a smart, clear path to enable operations over people in a way that does not compromise safety. I really appreciate the language there that goes beyond small UAS. We're seeing with the FAA's implementation of the durability and reliability approach to type certification and some of the things that are happening through the FAA's integration pilot program, such as Part 135 operations for cargo delivery and implications for that ultimately going into urban air mobility and passenger carrying. What an exciting time, because now we're going to get beyond, we're going to take everything that we learned with small UAS, we're going to fuse that with what we know and what we've learned with the manned aviation world, and really I think, start to see some advancement in what I would call true integration of UAS into the national airspace system in a way that is smart, not compromising safety. And I think it's going to add all kinds of efficiencies to various lines of business. So I think, do I think United's going to be flying an unmanned aircraft in the next 5 years? No. But I do think that we're going to see the needle move on cargo delivery. And I think that as that starts to happen, it'll start small and rural, but as it starts to get unpacked, it's going to help inform additional accessibility into the airspace in a way that we would all like to see. And, frankly, the military has been doing it for a while now. So it's, you've got to just have the right level of capability, rigor, discipline, and technology to help us get there. There's still some technological development that needs to happen. Detect and avoid technologies, reliable command and control technologies that are affordable. Most of the public agencies are not going to be able to afford the high cost satellite connectivity that some federal agencies are able to do. So I think that the combination of development of rules and advancement of technology is going to allow us to get into some of those areas over the next 5 years. And at Kansas State University, we're looking forward to opportunities to conduct the research, to take these technologies and help make recommendations for their continued development so that we can all get there safely.
Well, it is a very exciting time, and we are certainly looking forward to seeing what you and the Kansas State team has in store over the next couple of years. As we wrap this up, any closing thoughts you have for the audience?
No, please feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that I can do. We're passionate about public safety. During my Air Force time, we did intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, but our opportunities to get involved in humanitarian support was one of the things that just really energized us. At Kansas State University, we have that same passion for continuing to bring this technology to our public safety partners. And what a unique opportunity we have to be able to help support in that role. So if there's anything that Kansas State University can do in that vein, please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to work with you.
Kurt, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Taming Disaster. I hope you'll come back again soon when we've gone through some of this research and you can tell us about it and tell us what you've learned.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
All right. Kurt Carraway, UAS Department Head and Executive Director, Applied Aviation Research, Kansas State University Polytechnic. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for listening to the first episode of 2021 of Taming Disaster, Drones for Good.
Thank you for listening to Taming Disaster, a production of AIRT, the world's leading nonprofit organization supporting drones for good. Learn more about us online at airt.ngo. And be sure to tune in to our public safety focused podcast, Drone Responders, hosted by Charles Werner.